I've recently been posting some videos about PSA submissions and SGC. One of the videos is comparing the values of cards that have been graded by SGC versus the value of cards that have been graded by PSA. Another one was about deciding whether or not to send a card to PSA, and if you do, what's the process that you want to go through to make sure that you get the best grade possible. And the question that I keep getting over and over is, how do I know which cards to submit? Is the value of this card make it worthy of submitting for grading? Or does the PSA 10 value or PSA 9 value need to be above a certain amount in order to send it in and spend that money for grading? So I decided I'm going to make a video on the process I use. Doesn't mean it's the best method, but this is my thought process whenever I decide to send a card in to get graded. It's a pretty simple process, and I'm going to take you through 5 recent cards that I sent in to PSA for submission and why I sent them in and how it turned out. So I hope this helps answer some of those questions. Please keep sending me questions and comments because that's how I know what sort of content people want. So please like, please subscribe, but also give me comments to these videos and tell me specifically what are things that you want me to dig deeper on and create content for. So we have all these cards and we don't know which ones are the ones we should be getting graded and which are the ones we should be leaving raw. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my method that I go through when making the determination, is this a card I'm going to grade or is this a card that I'm going to leave alone? So there are really 2 main reasons why we would grade a sport card. The first reason, it's more liquid when it's graded. It is easier to sell, especially online when somebody can't see the card in person. The grade gives the buyer a much better idea of what the quality of the card actually is, so it's much easier to sell. The second reason, there are times that getting a card graded adds value to the card. It creates additional value by getting it graded. So why does it create additional value? Well, it adds demand for the card. There's a higher demand for a PSA 7 card than a 6 or a 10 than a 9. So by having more demand, by having it graded, it creates more value. It's a safer purchase. I've seen a lot of pictures online of things that looked really nice, and they're not really that nice. And not only that, but people don't always trust themselves, their own eyes, with what they see when they're looking at a card, even if it's in person. So by having it graded, by having it have a third party give it a really thorough look, then it allows the person who's buying the card to know really what they're getting. So do I get every card graded? Of course not. There's a lot of cards I do not get graded. You only get cards graded when the added value creates a net value increase, where the grading of the card makes the value of the card go up by more than it cost to get it graded. If it makes a card go up in value by $5, but it costs you $20 to grade it, of course you wouldn't get that graded. So what does that actually look like? So I'm going to take you through 5 recent cards I had graded over the last few months. The first card that I got graded, this was the longest ago, this was probably 5 months ago, was the 1981 Topps Larry Bird. So just today, I looked up recent raw sales of this card. And the last 4 raw ones of similar condition to the one that I had or have was $50, $90, $22,
and $22.50. That's kind of a range that's a little bit crazy. Again, when you buy a raw card online, it's all in the eye of the beholder. So we look here, and the average raw Larry Bird in very nice condition is selling for about $46.13. So the last 4 PSA 7 sales, $60, $56, $58, and $59. A much tighter spread because it's a known quantity. It's a safer purchase. We know what we're getting. The PSA 7 is averaging about $58.25. A PSA 8, the last 4 sold for $150, $124.50, $135, and $157.50. For an average of $141.75. Again, a fairly tight spread from the low to the high. And the PSA 9s, the last 4, sold for an average of $615.22. So, let's look at this 1981 Larry Bird. So, if I did not get it graded, the average raw value is about $46.13. So that's what I could expect to sell it for. If I get it graded, it's going to be about $20. Now, there could be some shipping costs. There are lots of promotions. The prices are always changing. I'm using $20 as sort of the baseline because, $15, $18 is kind of the range right now. $20 is kind of the range right now, plus a couple dollars for shipping. So I'm using $20. So the total investment in the card, if I get it graded, is $66.13. That I am all in on the value of the card if I were to sell it raw or buy it raw and grade it, $66.13. If it gets a 7, if I send it in and it gets a 7, the average value is $58.25. So if it gets a 7, I've lost $7.88. If it gets an 8, it gets an average of $141.75. So I'm up $75.62 of additional value because it was graded. So because I got it graded and it got the 8, I'm up $75.62. If it were to get the 9, it's worth $615.22, and I've added $549.09. So, again, this card is raw worth $46.13. But if I get it graded and it gets to 9, it's $549.09. Now, again, the examples that I use are high-quality ones. So, I had to make the decision. Am I willing to risk $20 in grading fees? Well, if it gets a 7, I lose $7.88 in value. I thought it was a high-end 8, low-end 9. I thought it had a really good chance at a 9. If it gets the 8, I add $75.62. And if it gets the 9, then I add almost $550. So, worst case scenario, I'm out $7.88. Best case scenario, I'm up $550. Of course I'm willing to risk $20 to potentially add $75.62 or $549.09 in profit, despite the fact that a worst case scenario is 7, I lose $7.88. So what happened? I've had this card since I was a kid. I've had this card since I was 10 years old. It's been stored away. I've kept it along the way, and it got an 8. So it's now worth an extra $75.62 should I decide to sell it because it's in an 8 holder. So this deal worked out for me. Let's look at the second card. The second card is a 1957 Topps John Unitas. You may have recently seen the video that I posted of the John Unitas collection that I purchased. I bought the entire collection of about 25 John Unitas cards, including the rookie, for $625. Raw rookies in a similar condition to the one that I got went for 227.50, 321, 438.66, and 327. So it's averaging $328.58. Now, I thought mine was a high-end 5. I was like, it's probably going to get a 5, but it has a chance at a 6. I think it's really nice. Worst case scenario, it gets a 4. So, if it gets a 4, it's worth $524 or $431 or $504 or $474. That's the last 4 sales. So on average, a 4 sells for $483.25. If it gets the 5, which is probably what it's going to get, it's going to average almost $680, quite a bit more than I paid for the card. If it gets a 6, it's worth almost $900 as an average sale as of the recording of this video in November of 2022. So, if I were to sell it raw, I could expect to get about $328.54, the average price of a raw John Unitas rookie in a similar condition to mine. $20 in grading fees. Now some of you are saying, whoa, this is an expensive card. You can get the $20 grading fee. Now my philosophy is I always send it in at a pretty low declared value, because if it grades high and they give you the higher grade and it goes outside of the range of that particular price of submission, they call you and they say, hey, your card is grading higher and is worth more than the amount that you declared the value. Would you like to pay to have the higher grading? And you say, well, yes, of course. And there you go. You pay the extra $10, or maybe it's even a $50 charge. So in this case, my total investment is $348.54. Best case scenario, maybe it requires a $50 submission, and it's an extra $30, so I'm out $378.54, which I would gladly pay the extra money for the higher grade. PSA 4's value is $483. So, if it gets a 4, worst case scenario, I'm up $134.71. If it gets the 5, it's worth almost $680. And that means I'm up $331.13. If it gets to 6, it's worth almost $900. I've added $550 in value over a similar raw card. So, am I willing to risk $20 to increase the card's value by $134.71 in a worst case scenario? But up to $547.06 in the best case scenario? Of course I am. Of course I'm going to risk $20. And hopefully they call me up and say, Ms. Miller, it's going to be $100 for your submission because the card graded at a 6 or 7 and is worth $1,000. That would be fantastic. So what happened? I bought that big lot for $625, and the card graded a 5. And I ended up paying a $50 submission fee. The card is now worth approximately, on average, $680. Now, I think it's a really high-end 5. I don't think it's an average 5. I think it's even one that you could consider regrading. So I actually think it's worth more than $680 because I think it's a really, really high 6. And I'm probably going to end up selling it on eBay. Haven't decided for sure what I'm going to do yet. The next card I looked at, the 1959 Jim Brown. Recent raw cards in similar condition to mine, sold for $81, $69, $122.50, $81, and $68. Again, a pretty big spread. Mine was the $69 purchase. That's what I paid for it. So the average raw one is $84.30. So right now, I'm up $15. So I'm doing pretty good. If I submit it and it gets a 3, the only 2 recent PSA 3 sales are averaging $140.50. The only 3 recent PSA 4 sales are averaging 182.17, and the only recent PSA 5 sales are averaging 312.44. So, if I bought an average one for $84.30, which mine I'm assuming is worth, and I added $20 in grading costs, I'm all in at $104.30. Now for me, I bought mine for $69, so I'm actually all in at $89. The $69 I bought it for plus the $20 in grading fee. If it gets a 3, it's adding $49.20 in value. If it gets a 4, I'm adding $75.62 in value. And if it gets a 5, I'm adding $208.14 in value. So no matter, and I think it's a solid 4. I think it has a legit chance at a 5. And again, the only way this works is if you have a pretty good understanding of what grade your cards would get. If you think it's going to get an 8 and it's going to get a 3, this wouldn't work. See, this requires you to have a pretty good amount of research looking at examples online, comparing yours honestly to the ones that are selling and what they are in different grades. So am I willing to risk $20 when the worst case scenario it gets a 3 and I add $49 in value? But in the best case scenario, I add $208 in value? And yeah, maybe they call me up and say, it's going to be $30 for the grading fee because it was above the $200 declared value. No problem. I'm more than happy to risk $20 to have at least $49.20 more in value on the card. So what happened? I bought the card for $69 and it's currently at PSA. I don't know. To be continued. Card number 4, a more modern card. The margins on modern cards are tighter because if it doesn't get a 10, the value of a 9 and the value of a raw are pretty similar. So this is a 2020 Topps Chrome Refractor Jude Bellingham. I really like soccer cards. I'm really into soccer. The World Cup is coming up. I think soccer cards are really depressed in value right now, and I could really see them jumping during the World Cup. So the recent raw sales of this card are $17.02. Now the last 4 sales in a PSA 9 are averaging $17.53. So again, a pack fresh card in the newer modern cards are very similar in value to a PSA 9 in most cases. So you kind of need to make sure it gets the 10 in order for this to be paying off. So this is a more difficult decision here. So if I were to sell the card raw, I would expect to get about $17. The grading fees are $20. So I'm going to spend $37.02 in this card to have a raw one and get it graded. If I get a 9, I'm going to lose $20. But if I get a 10, I'm going to add $58.90. So let's look at this decision for this Jude Bellingham card. Am I willing to risk $20 in grading fees? Well, the worst case scenario is it gets the 9 and I lose $19.49. The best case scenario is I earn $58.90. So I'm going to risk losing $20 to add $58.90. That's a little bit of a difficult one. At the time, the values were different on this card. At the time, this card was selling for about $170 in a 10. I was willing to risk $20 to have a chance at the profit, but the profit then was more. If it was this situation, it's a tough one. I'm probably not going to do it because if I submit it 3 times, it's probably not going to get a 10. And if it does, it'll get a 10 1 out of 3 times, even though it got the 10. It got the 10, and I sold it shortly thereafter for $135. Last but not least, I wanted to do another modern card. So this is a Pedri Panini Chronicles Purple Mojo insert. This is sort of one of the go-to cards from that particular set. The rated rookie Pedri, who is one of the young phenoms for Spain, who I think could do very well in this World Cup. So Pedri, Barcelona player, in a raw state, it sells for $27, $23.50, and $30 in the last three. So it's averaging about $26.83. Now, in this particular modern card, if it gets a 9, it's averaging $45.91. So a little bit better margin there. If it gets a 10, the last two sold for $102.50 and $117.50. And if I'm being straight with you, about 3 months ago over the summer, there were a couple that sold for over $200. Again, it's selling for $110 right now, and it was $200 pretty regularly, $200 to $230 pretty regularly over the summer. So these cards have also been going down, and I think that they might be going up with the World Cup. So if I were to sell the card raw, it's $26.83. If I were to get it graded, it would be $20 more for a total of $46.83. So, worst case scenario, it gets the 9. Now, I'm only sending in cards that I think look perfect. A modern card has to be perfect. So if it gets a 9, I lose 92 cents. If it gets a 10, I add $72.98. Now, again, when I did this, the 10 was selling for over $200. So what do I do on the Pedri card? I'm risking $20 in grading fees. The worst case scenario on this card that I've looked over super closely is I lose 92 cents. If it gets the 9, I lose 92 cents. If it gets the 10, I add $72.98. I think I make this deal. There's not really a risk. So I was really willing to risk it. Now, at the time, again, soccer cards are struggling. At the time, the card was selling for over $200, which made it an even easier decision. But yeah, I'll risk $20, where if everything goes wrong, I've lost 92 cents in total cost and value. And if I get the 10, I pick up $73. That's an easy decision. The Bellingham was a hard decision. This was an easy decision. So what did I do? Well, if you saw my video of the cards coming back from PSA, I got 1.9 and I got 1.10. So on one of them, I'm breaking even. And on one of them, I picked up a few extra dollars. So a couple things to conclude on. First, the decision about which cards to grade is not about which ones we hope get a high grade, because if they get the high grade, then they're worth a whole fortune. That's not the way to do it. We have to be able to look over our cards carefully, watch my video on making a PSA submission and getting more Gem Mint 10s for some tips on how to look cards over carefully and have the best chance at getting a 10. And we need to decide which cards have been graded based on math, not based on our hopes, not based on the jackpot at the end of the rainbow if it gets the 10. And how willing are we to risk money for a potential upside? The math should make the decisions. In the 5 examples here, the Jude Bellingham is the only one that right now I probably wouldn't make. The other 4 cards are kind of easy decisions in my opinion. Evaluate the card well. Look the card over well. Watch my video on tips on how to improve your submissions and get more 10s, and not just be sending in money to PSA to be grading your cards over and over. You need to look them over closely, especially modern cards. I hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you take a moment to subscribe to my channel and like this video, because that's what tells me that this is content that you enjoy.